In 2004, a barefoot boy knocked on the door of a police station in Los Angeles with a story that no one wanted to believe. He spoke of a woman admired by everyone, an exemplary, welcoming mother, praised by authorities and celebrated as a symbol of generosity. But what that boy revealed dismantled the entire charade. Behind the smiles, the perfect reports and the photos with happy young people, there was a disturbing scheme of control, fear, and manipulation. Her name was Marta Delacroix. And this story will make you suspicious of everything that seems too good to be true. Marta Delacroix seemed to have been molded to inspire confidence. His presence was sweet, his words always filled with empathy. In the modest neighborhood where she lived, she was known as everyone's mother, biological mother of 12 children, and, as she said, from the heart of many others. Marta opened the doors of her home to young people at risk, mainly teenagers rejected by shelters, negligent families, or the system itself. She fed them, gave them shelter, clothing, and, most rarely, ears. Social authorities saw in her a rare hope in an increasingly indifferent world. Politicians used his image in campaigns. Assistance programs cited her as an example. Marta had become a kind of symbol of good. Children and youth workers made frequent visits. They noted in their reports the good behavior of the young people, the clean rooms, the smell of fresh food coming from the kitchen. They saw the boys and girls with their hair done, smiling, some even wearing school uniforms. The visits were always short, as Marta never seemed to have any problems. And as if it were part of a rehearsed theater, the young people confirmed everything with silent gestures of approval. No one screamed, no one cried. The house exuded an almost artificial order, as if it was staged to fool the untrained eye. But no one seemed to notice. On the contrary, they left praising his dedication and promising more financial support. Marta knew how to please. He knew exactly what to show and what to hide. What no one imagined was that behind every Marta smile, there was a cold calculation. Behind every hug, a strategy. The house that appeared to be a refuge hid a disguised prison. The woman everyone admired collected secrets, and the more she was exalted, the more powerful she became. In the eyes of the city, Marta was a savior. But in the eyes of those who lived under her roof, she was something else. Something that could not be named out loud. The neighbors only saw the facade, but behind those walls, where the cameras couldn't reach and the reports didn't dare touch, hid a world ruled by fear, silence, and absolute control. And all of this was about to be revealed. But until then, many would still applaud Marta Delacroix as a hero. In the eyes of the system, Marta was a dedicated mother. But within the walls of his home, everything was part of a cold and calculated mechanism. The kindness that overflowed in front of the cameras hid an ingenious scheme. Marta not only welcomed young people, she recorded them. He manufactured identities, filled out papers with surgical precision, forged signatures, invented medical records, adapted school certificates. Nothing escaped his falsification. For the state, each new son represented financial assistance. For Marta, it was more than money. It was control. The younger they were, the more power she accumulated. She knew the codes. I knew how to avoid audits. And he mastered the art of appearing irreproachable like no one else. She wasn't just any scammer. She was a strategist. But money wasn't his only fuel. Marta had a thirst for dominion. She liked to see those young people under her command, like pieces on a board that only she could move. Each had a function. Some cleaned the house, others took care of the youngest. There were those who prepared meals, those who washed clothes, those who lied fluently during inspections. Punishment came not with screams, but with looks, with the absolute silence, with the isolation, with the fear of being forgotten in a dark room for days. She said she was teaching responsibility, but in reality, it modeled blind obedience. She created soldiers for a war that only she understood, and the more the young people bowed, the more satisfied she seemed. An empire of silence was born there, fueled by submissive looks and forced smiles. There were rules, schedules, an unwritten manual that everyone learned over time. Marta decided when it was time to eat, when someone could use the bathroom, when they were allowed to smile, and for how long. One wrong gesture, one untimely comment, and the punishment came quickly, efficient, almost invisible. She said everything was for their own good, as if extreme control was a form of protection. And the young people believed. After all, where else would they have hot food, a roof over their heads, and a clean bed? Most of them have never known any other form of affection, so they accepted. They swallowed the pain with dinner. They slept in fear, but in silence. Because for many, worse than living there was having nowhere to go. And that was exactly what Marta was betting on: hopelessness. Over time, the young people who lived with Marta began to disappear. It was a slow, almost imperceptible process, like a candle burning out in the dark. They didn't just lose their freedom, they lost their identity. The way of speaking changed. The once lively looks became distant, empty. They stopped dreaming, asking questions, questioning what was right. It was as if everyone was cast from the same mold, obedient, silent, grateful to be there. And Marta reinforced this idea daily. He said the world out there was cruel, that no one wanted them, that only she accepted them, and that coming from someone who fed them, clothed them, and claimed to love them was enough to convince them that it was the best place in the world, even with all the fear. Inside that house, there was no room for individuality. The I was eliminated to make room for the we under Marta's rules. Silence was the official language. They learned to recognize her moods by the sound of her footsteps, by the way she closed a drawer, by the delay in replying to say good morning. A simple displeasure could mean suspending meals, being banned from leaving the room, or worse, total isolation, days without talking to anyone, in a cold room, without light. But even so, few tried to escape. The fear was greater than the suffering. Some had scars they couldn't show. Others had secrets that Marta used as ammunition. It was a psychological prison. And for many, the worst punishment was to disappoint her. Because, despite everything, they still called her mother. But the system that was supposed to protect them was still blind. The reports remained positive. Visits were increasingly rare, and Marta knew that. She knew she was safe, as long as the young people remained silent. So it kept them busy, distracted, and most of all, grateful. Sometimes I took them for short walks. I took photos. I posted it on social media with loving captions, and every like, every online compliment reinforced his charade even more. Neighbors applauded her, donations increased, and the young people sank deeper into the abyss of silence. Until, one day, one of them took a deep breath, and he understood that the greatest danger was not what was outside, in those walls, but what was hidden right there, inside that house that everyone praised. And it was then that the pact began to fall apart. It was on a sultry dawn in 2004 that everything began to fall apart. While most of them slept, one of the young people, who we will call Eli here, decided to do what no one had dared. He wasn't the oldest nor the strongest, but something inside him had changed. Maybe it was the memory of a different life, maybe the dull look of one of the younger girls. That night, the fact is that he waited for Marta to lock the last door, heard her footsteps disappear into the hallway, and acted. With his nerves on edge, he went out through a window that creaked as if screaming for help. He ran barefoot through the empty streets of Los Angeles, feeling his heart in his throat and his feet tearing on the asphalt. He ran not only for his own freedom, but for the truth that finally needed to be told. Upon arriving at the nearest police station, covered in sweat and dust, Eli didn't hesitate. He asked to speak to an officer. He told everything, name by name, room by room. He spoke of the rules, the punishments, the false identities, the locked rooms, and the fears that never had a name. The police officers, accustomed to weak reports and confusing reports, this time heard something different. Precise details, coherence, real pain. That same morning, social service agents and investigators were mobilized. An emergency operation was mounted. But when they knocked on Marta's door, it was too late. The house was strangely clean, almost empty, and she had disappeared, taking 7 young people with her, as if she knew the end of her theater was about to be revealed. What started with a barefoot boy became a national scandal. The newspapers soon printed headlines with words such as fraud, kidnapping, and system failure. While the police organized a task force, new reports emerged of other houses where Marta had passed before. Some young people who had left previously decided to speak out. Their stories coincided: fear, manipulation, control, and a woman who knew exactly how to use the appearance of kindness as armor. Public opinion was divided. Some said it was all exaggeration. Others demanded answers from the government. And in the midst of it all, 7 young people were missing. Marta had erased her tracks, but the investigation was just beginning. And what they would discover in the following months was even more disturbing than anyone imagined. The search for Marta Delacroix turned into a real hunt. The case, which initially seemed more like an isolated complaint, gained federal proportions. The FBI took charge of the investigation when it was confirmed that Marta had crossed state borders with forged documents and teenagers under her care. Authorities began searching every corner of the country: old bank accounts, fictitious names, rental cars, toll cameras. But Marta always seemed one step ahead. She knew how to disappear. She knew that all she had to do was change her haircut, her tone of voice, and her name on a form, and the world wouldn't recognize her. The face that used to smile for the cameras on social programs was now the same one that appeared on wanted posters. For months, there was no sign. The press cooled off. Public opinion was divided between oblivion and disbelief. But behind the scenes, the agents remained firm. An unusual wire transfer in Arizona reignited the case. A cash withdrawal made in a small town attracted the attention of an FBI analyst. Days later, another suspicious movement emerged in New Mexico. The trail began to piece itself together, like pieces of a dark puzzle. Undercover agents visited shelters, clandestine schools, and even churches known for sheltering undocumented people. And then, a concrete clue, an anonymous report made by public telephone. The voice was male, trembling. He claimed to have seen a woman with 7 young men living in an isolated property near the Mexican border. The operation was staged with military precision. In Mexico, under a new name and wearing clothes typical of the region, Marta lived as if nothing had happened. She claimed to be a missionary. I did volunteer work. The neighborhood knew her by another name, and of course, for her kindness. But all it took was a cross-check of data and an old photograph to confirm it was her. The arrest took place at dawn. Marta couldn't resist. He didn't scream. He didn't ask anything. He just smiled, as if he had been waiting for that moment. She was quietly extradited and put on trial in the United States. In court, his public image shattered once and for all, and, for the first time, the young people who once called Marta mother could be heard. Their voices, previously muffled, echoed like a collective cry for justice. Marta Delacroix's conviction was received with a mixture of relief and shame. Relief to finally see her behind bars. Shame for realizing how much the system failed. Marta was sentenced for fraud, kidnapping, mistreatment, and emotional abuse. But the damage went beyond what any sentence could repair. Young people who spent years under his control carried invisible marks, traumas, fears, broken identities. Some could no longer trust adults. Others, years later, still woke up in the middle of the night, hoping to hear her footsteps. And the question echoed among jurors, prosecutors, and citizens. How could a woman so close to the authorities manage to deceive so many people for so long? It was an institutional breach, an ignored warning, a mirror of the fragility of the system. Subsequent investigations revealed glaring flaws in the inspection processes. Many of the reports praising Marta had been completed hastily, with visits made only in appearance. Some social workers, pressured by targets and lack of staff, admitted that they never suspected it. The house was clean, the children were dressed, and Marta knew exactly what to say. She manipulated with mastery. She smiled, offered coffee, told touching stories. Every gesture was studied, every word calculated. And so, for years, he achieved what few can do, hiding horrors in broad daylight. The Delacroix case became the subject of seminars, theses, and documentaries, but most of all, it became a symbol of an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the real danger doesn't come from outside. He lives inside the house, upstairs, in the next room. Marta is still in prison today. She grows old behind bars, where she still maintains the pose of a strong and misunderstood woman. He never asked for forgiveness. He never admitted guilt. For her, everything was done for the good. And perhaps that is the most disturbing detail, because the deepest evil doesn't scream. He whispers. It doesn't scare you with its monstrous appearance. He smiles. Extend your hand. Promise to be careful, and it hides in the places where we least expect it. Marta's story is not just about a woman who cheated the system. It's about how many other Marthas there might be, wearing the guise of kindness, waiting for the next opportunity. And it forces us to face the question that no one wants to answer. When the monster lives among us, how do we recognize it? And if all this happened right under the eyes of the authorities, how many other stories like this are still hidden behind doors that no one dares to open? If you've made it this far, comment below. Would you have suspected Marta? And remember, sometimes danger smiles at you.